what does winning a conference tournament really mean? Aside from getting an automatic bid, does it predict tournament success? How do offensive and defensive anomalies do in the tournament? Does overall talent really trump results on the court? Well, all that depends, and I'll get to it later. But before I go to any of that, first I want to say, if I diss your team in this video, I am sorry. I'm not doing it on purpose. I don't hate them. I'm just doing my job of going through and seeing what teams fit where. And again, these are all predictive stuff. I'll say it throughout. The bracket is a placement that, like bracket placement where you are, helps a ton and can really change a team's trajectory from before Selection Sunday to after Selection Sunday. Who they play, where they are, matters a ton. And this is obviously being recorded before that. So I'm not some perfect mind reader or predictor of all this stuff. Yes, there's gonna be some stuff wrong, but this is just what I found, and I'm just giving you the historical stats and seeing if we can back it up. And lastly, thank you so much for the support last video. I've never seen anything like it on this channel. Like, obviously that's the biggest thing I've done, and I'm just really grateful for those of you who liked and commented and subscribed. I'm sorry for some of the screw ups in the video where I got my info wrong, like the 5-year coach thing, and I totally forgot Tennessee. Of the end, at least, of explaining why I didn't have them in that final bracket, like contenders there. But either way, like almost half the comments were positive, and the just video has been forming way better than I ever expected. So thank you guys so much for that, and I hope that at least all of you, if not most of you, subscribe and are ready for more videos, because we got this one and then the bracket predictor, and then I do a lot of NFL stuff and try and mix it up with different things. So if you're interested in that, please stay around. But college basketball, just that video and the love it's gotten has really made me reinvigorated for YouTube and to just do more stuff like this. So thank you guys so much for that. Since 2001, that will be where basically most of this data will come from the first half of the video. Only 4 Power 5 conference tournament winners seeded 4 or lower have made the Final Four, and none of them went further. If you take out NC State's crazy run, with me being a Wolfpack right here last year, which was amazing, if you take that out because it is an insane anomaly, then you obviously only have 3. So if we have a Power 5 conference winner that gets seeded 4 or lower, which could that happen? Absolutely could happen. I could see it in the Big East 100%. SEC, a crazy team could go on a run for sure. Big Ten feels like it's almost fit for that with the amount of teams they have in that mid-tier range. Do not just blind pick them to the SEC or to the Final Four. I know that it can seem like the momentum is on their side. Is that good reasoning? Maybe, maybe not, but it's not 100% certain. So just if they are seeded 4 or lower, let's not do that. But are most people going to do that? No, probably not. So you might say, hey, Stone, that's not really that big of a deal. I'll say, okay, let's go into it a little bit further. All conference tournament winners since 2001, I have ranked right here. You'll see it on the screen. It shows the row labels are how far they got in each round. So obviously you're losing in the first round would be 64. Winning it all would be 1. 2 would be runner-up. Average KenPom rank, standard deviation of each KenPom rank. KenPom is the advanced site that I used last time. I had a lot of questions about that. I wanted to make it known. KenPom is the analytical site that I like to use, but evanmia.com is where I got a lot of the charts, and I really like that too. And there's also Torvik, who also does some stuff, and I use him for reference, but I prefer KenPom and evanmia.com because Torvik and KenPom are pretty similar, but evanmia is a little bit different, so I like just using one of them to compare each other with. But that is their average rank in KenPom. And then the count of performance, 1 and 2. That just shows the percentage of teams, the percentage obviously, and then the count is just the number. So 137 total teams of all conference tourney winners that I have since 2001. And you can see the chart is pretty interesting. I can have a graph right here for you. We see a peak around the Sweet 16. So there is a pretty, normal climb from still a lot, but losing in the first round, losing in the second round, / losing in the Sweet 16. But there is a giant dip between Elite 8 and Sweet 16, as you can see right there. And even here, 24% of teams in the Sweet 16 to only almost 14% in the Elite 8. So you see there's gaps here. Elite 8 and Final Four are pretty close, and then the title winner is even more than just the team who makes the title game. So what can we take from this? Well, I would say we can try and use KenPom as well to kind of sort this all out. If you have a team that wins their conference tournament, obviously not all, but most of the time, if they are ranked around, let's say 25, give or take, it says 23 ranks, that would be lower. So could be a lot of different teams, but on average, it's going to be lower KenPom ranked teams. They have a 17% chance of losing in the first round, and a better chance of making the second round, and even better of making the Sweet 16. So what can we conclude from this? Obviously, we show the KenPom ranks 18 and 10. The higher the KenPom for the team, if they win their conference tournament, realistically, they're going to go farther. But it seems like there's a peak at the Sweet 16. So while the conference tournaments aren't done, I think we can use this for the future, as if there is a team that is going into it that is maybe somewhere fit around this average KenPom rank, we can try and predict the realistic chance that they will go, far or relatively far. And Sweet 16 seems to be the majority and the peak right there, with a heavy percentage making it at least to that point, and even more so win in the second round than the first round. And you would think it would be lower because there should be a downward trend from teams available in the first round to teams available in the title game, because it's obviously not a lot. But we're dealing with conference tournament winners. So these are some teams that have actually gone on and won a bracket. They have a better chance of making the Sweet 16 than losing in the first round. Same with second round compared to first round. So that's what we can take away. Then we go at a drop off. If you're going to put a conference tournament winner to the Elite 8, they better be worthy. Okay? Does that mean they have to have a higher KenPom rank? No. Look at this right here. It's actually the average rank for KenPom is better for Sweet 16 than Elite 8. Elite 8 is where we see those real significant runs that I think you can try and quantify with how far they maybe went in the tournament and the momentum they really have. I think the Sweet 16 teams here are teams that maybe had a bye or two, and it wasn't some crazy run, but they're not also some crazy dominant team. These teams are not the Dukes, the Auburns of this year. This is teams that win this conference tournament but aren't overwhelmingly dominant and didn't have a crazy run. I think the Elite 8 here is for those on average lower teams that do make it farther. But you see, it's not that far from Final Four. It's only a one kind of little few percent dip. So honestly, if you haven't gone to the Elite 8 and you really like them, you might as well pick them to go to the Final Four, because the little, difference there is very small. And then we have a final gap, and that's obviously making the title game. If you have a team that wins their conference tournament, they make the title game, they're more likely to win it than lose it. In fact, it's double. 4.38% losing in the title game if they make it, 8% winning in the title game. So what can we take from this? Well, we can look at teams in the title game. Hey, did they win their conference championship? And if they say yes, or you are trying to predict and pick, if you have a team that won their conference title and you have them conference tournament and you have them in the title game, you might as well pick them to win it all, because there's on average more than double chance that they actually win it rather than losing in the championship game. And these are in total, but it really, what we need to do is kind of dive into the seeds, because obviously not all these teams are made equally. So what I did was split them up into different seeds. First, we'll start with the double-digit seeds, meaning they were a double-digit seed in the NCAA tournament after winning their conference tournament. And we can show you it right here with obviously the same stuff, but this is only double-digit seeds, so 10 seed or lower. For the anomalies, we obviously have Final Four and Elite 8. Only 2 have done it since 2001. Last year's NC State and back in 2021, Oregon State. Those are, 7.14%, like in total, it's around 14.5%, pretty substantial amount. But in terms of predicting, like you can't really go all in and predict on a 14% chance. So then we have to really look at 64, 32, and 16 for each round. And that is where we kind of see the normal dip right here, with 35% being this round of the first round losing, 28 being losing in the second round, and then 21% losing in the Sweet 16. I think what we can take from here is the difference between the real getting past that first weekend to the Sweet 16. You got to have a certain rank, because you can see the KenPom rank 40, around 41 is the average KenPom rank, with only a standard deviation of 6. So it only varies like as far back in terms of the most possible, highest percentage teams of like 46, 50 maybe have made the Sweet 16. The other two are around the 50s and have a very wide range. So if we go into this conference, tournament weekend and we get a team that could be a double-digit seed, which obviously hasn't happened very often, if they are somewhere in that 40-ish KenPom rank, you should pick them to go to the Sweet 16, because it's statistically more likely to happen. And if they are in the 50s and stuff, you better really love that team, like NC State and Oregon State, if you want to pick them to go farther. But this is not a big sample size, I understand. So what if we get something like, the kind of mid-range right here, like the 9 through 4 seeds, and which, by the way, these double-digit seeds, I understand they haven't happened a lot, but they've actually happened 4 times in the last 5 seasons, where a team won their conference tournament, Power 5 conference tournament, and ended up being a double-digit seed in the NCAA tournament. So don't be surprised if it happens this year. I'm not saying it will, but 4 out of the last 5 seasons, it has happened. But let's go ahead and get into the mid-seeds. This is seeds 9 through 4 in their ranking, and I will show them up on the screen right now. As you can see, obviously the same as everything else. No one making the title game here, but the amount is more. However, there's only one that has even made the Elite 8, but not the Final 4. That was 2014 MSU. And there have been 3 that have made the Final 4, and they were all 4 and 5 seeds. So no one 6 or 6 through 9 in terms of seeding has ever made it to the Elite 8. So if we see something like that, maybe be weary of picking the momentum-based team that is 6 through 9 seed in the tournament that wins their conference tournament. And funny enough, what we see here is they have a better chance of going to the round of 32 than they do losing in the first round. And the KenPom rank between the two of Sweet 16 and round of 32 is virtually the same. So not too much difference there, but the percentage is huge. 40% compared to 12.5%. So what is kind of funny here is, I know it's a lower sample size, but by half or so, still a good amount. There's a better chance of a double-digit seed making the Sweet 16 that won their Power 5 conference tournament than there is a mid seed, like 6 through 4 or 6 through 9, making the Sweet 16. So I think for teams like that, maybe you could have them, if we have that this year, their maybe peak be at round of 32, which you're saying, hey, that makes sense. Well, a lot of people like to take these conference tournament winning seeds and have them go far because they have the momentum based on their side. And that's not always necessarily the case. For the last one here, we're going to go 1 through 3 seeds right here. And this one is obviously way more. You obviously have people that can actually win it all here and make it, and seems pretty relatively even. The KenPom rank slightly goes down as you go farther. The percentages are all similar. Well, I want you to put them into this chart right here. This is about as bell curve of a bell curve as you could possibly get. And these are 1 through 3 seed conference tournament winners, with the peak being Sweet 16 and obviously going down each way, with champion and runner-up being separate. If they were combined, they'd be a little higher than Final 4. But still, in terms of basic statistics, bell curve, this is about as simple as you can get. Seems like a pretty normal distribution to me, which you might say, hey, what does that mean? Well, it means that just because this is 1 through 3 seeds, by the way, 1 through 3, just because they win their conference tournament does not guarantee some sort of really far success. Now, does it mean you need to pick them to lose early? No. But it seems like the Sweet 16 might be a sweet spot, no pun intended, to have them go. But if you have them losing in the round of 32 compared to the Elite 8, like, hey, a little bit of a difference, but it's not all that crazy. It really isn't. I think obviously on average they go farther, but between here, like 12-8 losing in the first weekend, and then 17-11 Elite 8 / Final Four. The only thing I think we can definitely take away from this is, hey, like we said earlier, if you have them going to the championship game, might as well pick them to win it, because on average they have a better chance of actually doing that. So also some stuff I want to throw in. Since 2001, 46% of title teams have won their conference, so it is a little bit under, but around 50-50 since 2001 of tournament teams have been conference title winners, which you'd probably think would be maybe a little more, but that's what it is at this point. And 35% of the teams in the title game won their conference. Only 3 times in the past 24 years did we have 2 conference champions play each other in the title game, which is only 12.5%. That was 2018, but it hasn't happened after 2018 since 06 and 07 with Florida going back to back. So, like I said earlier, 35% of teams in the title game won their conference. So only about a third of the, let's say we go for, look at the past 2 years. Oh, on average, one of them made or won their conference tournament, which is not as much as you would think. And it seems odd, but I even looked into Final Four, and it's exactly 1/3, 0.33 repeating percent. Exactly 1/3 of Final Four teams are conference tournament winners. So I think you can view this as, on average, like we said, at least 1 to 2 conference tournament winners actually make the Final Four from Power 5 conferences. So, what did we learn? Yes, there are anomalies to everything, as always, but for a predictive perspective, higher seeds winning or losing in the tournament, their conference tournament, shouldn't completely change your pick. Now, that does not mean, do not get me wrong here, it does not mean that if Duke or Auburn win their conference, you should fade them. No, don't do that. That's not what that means. Unless you want to. Hey, I saw some Duke hate in the comments. If you want to do that, hey, that's fine. But don't let another team winning their conference tournament completely throw off your thoughts on the other team. Don't let that happen. Now, the next thing I kind of want to get into is outliers. Statistical outliers in the NCAA tournament. The first thing, and what I kind of want to mean is when I say an anomaly or an outlier, I mean they are heavily ranked in terms of the difference. They're ranked way higher on one side of the ball than the other. So they're either, let's say, really high on offense, but not as, like, pretty poor on defense, or really high on defense, but pretty poor on offense for tournament standards. Now, the first criteria we're going to look at with this kind of group of teams, because there's levels to this, but these outliers are top 10, as I'm recording this, could change, but top 10 on one side of the ball and below 50 on the other. The way I'm using this is I'm basing it off of Ken Palm's ranking in terms of their efficiency and just net rating and all that stuff. They rank the teams, so they're either top 10 on one side of the ball, but below 50 on the other. And the first team that we're going to look into is Kentucky. Historically, Kentucky, at least, or not historically, but right now, Kentucky, I'd say, is projected 3 to 4 seed, is kind of what Bracketology has. Again, I'm recording these before the main games of all the Power 5 conference tournaments. But historically, 3/4 seeds that are heavily offensive weighted, because Kentucky is a heavily offensive weighted team, have a 72% chance to make at least the Sweet 16 and a 22% chance to make the Elite 8. But more importantly, only 10% go out in round 1. Again, these are historically 3 and 4 seeds, which is what Kentucky is projected to be, and are anomalies, meaning they are top 10 for offense but below 50 for defense. And the way I did it was, yes, 50 and 80 is a big difference. The data that I have, if let's say a team had an 80 ranked defense, I would take about 10 spots above or below. So with Kentucky, that was kind of the thing, except with it being 50, we only did like 5, so up to 45, and then down to like 50/60 to try and get their rankings. But it's by seed, so it's not just random stuff. No, these are 3 and 4 seeds. Only 10% go out in round 1, and they have a 72% chance of making the Sweet 16. Now, this Kentucky team, they did lose Jackson Robinson recently. Now their 3-point percentage is much worse. I think a bad matchup for them would be a safe turnover team, meaning one that really keeps care of the ball and just also does a great job forcing turnovers, or just a really good 3-point defending team, along with some good rebounding, or just a better offense in general. Now, I know I listed a lot of stuff, but I think all those can happen individually. They don't have to happen collectively for there to be a potential worse matchup for them. Now, I think with Kentucky, with these injuries and stuff, I think their ceiling is not as high. But depending on the matchup, I at least don't expect a round 1 loss this year for the Cats. I don't think they're going to have some crazy round 1 loss again. And yes, the 3 versus the 4 seed matters. Absolutely, because I see a pretty big drop-off personally in the competition you'll face with a 3 seed compared to a 4 seed, with the 14 seeds versus the 13 seeds that are out there. I think it's a pretty big difference. So while I think the kind of injuries have limited their ceiling, realistically, I would not have them going out in round 1, and I think their ceiling should be Sweet 16, but there's a pretty good chance that they can make the Sweet 16, historically. Again, all based on the tournament where they are, but don't have Kentucky going out too far this year, but don't have them losing too early. Let's just keep it that way. I think Sweet 16 might be a pretty good spot for Kentucky this year. Next is going to be St. John's. Now, I know the allure that St. John's and Rick Pitino kind of bring, and they have, but be wary of picking this team to go as far as their seed says. I'll just say that. They are projected a 2 or a 3 seed. We will see. Obviously, the Big East tournament is coming up. 2 and 3 seeds that are heavily defensively weighted, as St. John's is, make the Elite 8 0% of the time since 2001. I'll repeat, 2 to 3 seeds that are heavily defensive weighted make the Elite 8 0% of the time. Now, could this be the first? Yes, absolutely, at least from the data I'm using in 2001. And it's not a gigantic sample size. That is true. I want to lay that out. It's not a big sample size. But I think it does show that unless you are an Elite 1 seed, the heavily defensive teams just have a lower ceiling. They just do, unless you are a for sure Elite 1 seed, which St. John's will not be. I understand Pitino's history, and I totally respect it. I don't think that I don't think they're going to go out in round 1 or anything. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think you can go out to a Final Four, let alone a title game, with your offense being under 60th in the country and you're shooting under 30% from the 3 in today's game. I just don't think you can go to the Elite 8, or I mean Final Four. Could you go to the Elite 8? Maybe, but these stats don't think you can either. And now, again, they're not losing in round 1 at all. They're not. But I think their ceiling is Sweet 16. Like, that seems realistic. That's their ceiling. And honestly, round 2 might be it, depending on the matchup. It might be round 2 as well. They are a poor free throw shooting team that they just really scare me to make a good run. They kind of compare closest with 2024 Iowa State, who was a 2 seed, won their conference, lost in the Sweet 16 to Illinois, beat a number 7 seed that was just an overseeded Washington State team in the second round. So it didn't really make a ton of noise. I think that could be St. John's, depending on what 7 seed they get, or maybe 10 seed if the 10 seed wins. I understand all the close losses. I know they could have an amazing record. They still do, but it could be even better. It's just their best wins are not even top 25 teams in terms of net ranking, and they're not dominating them at all. They split with Creighton. They're not dominating their conference at all. The great teams in their conference. They split with Creighton and almost split with Marquette. They beat Marquette twice, but the final game they barely won, and honestly should have. Marquette really choked that game at the end with the shot putback they had. And they also have injuries. More recently, De'Veon Smith. He's their second best ball handler, passer, and on-ball defender who's been dealing with injuries, and the games are much, much closer when he does not play, because there's been a few times like that throughout the season. I think a team that's big up front, deep, meaning they get defensive rebounds and good 2-point defense and aren't afraid to actually earn it at the line, like make St. John's earn it at the line, because St. John's a poor free throw shooting team. So if they can take advantage of that while still being bigger up front and deep in the front court, I think that's a really, really bad matchup for them. And I think that could easily happen in the second round, and in the Sweet 16, I think I wouldn't have them going much farther past that. So again, could be wrong. Hey, you can go back to this clip if I'm wrong, and I have the right to change it based on the bracket, but this is just what I'm finding. Anomalies, this is what I'm looking at, and historically, it does not bode well, or as well as you would think, for a 2 and 3 seeded St. John's. Next is going to be Missouri. Missouri is really, really odd, but they're projecting as a 6 or 7 seed. Could change. I think the round of 32 is a safe median for them, but a Sweet 16 is kind of the one I'm looking at as well. As I'm recording this, they have the number 5 offense, but the number 75 defense. Of their very few comparisons, half of them went to round 2, and the other half went to the Sweet 16. None of them lost in the first round. The 2 that went to the Sweet 16 were 2017 Michigan, which was a really underseeded team, and 2006 Georgetown, who faced an overseeded number 2 Ohio State team to end up making the Sweet 16. Missouri's kind of really been on a skid lately, but they have really good wins in the SEC. Florida and Bama beat both of them. They've gotten a bit unlucky. They are bottom 330th in luck rating, according to KenPom. Their opponent free throw percentage is abnormally high, and, hey, I think that kind of plays into luck too. It's not like you're going to make opponents, they're not going to be like, oh, I'll make my free throw today and I won't the next game. Like, that's not really the case. And they've kind of been unlucky with the average free throws made throughout an entire course of a season. If opponents like offense, if they can compete, they normally win because Missouri's D just really weighs them down. So if you have a team that is relatively close in offense and just much better in defense, I think they kind of clear Missouri. And I think a really good 2-point defensive team inside the paint, I think a really good team like that could be a problem for them. They faced 7 teams that were top 50 in 2-point defense. They lost 5 of them and only won 2 of them, and one of them was a win by 1 point. There are 2 teams that are tied for number 1 in the SEC in kill shot margin, which is kill shots achieved minus kill shots conceded. If you don't know, last video I did a lot of different stuff on that. Kill shot is basically a 10-0 run, and if you go on a 10-0 run, you have a 70% of the time you win a game over that, and it kind of goes farther and farther the more that you have, but also the less that you give up, because if you give up one, boom, you're back at square one. The teams that have the highest margin in the SEC: Auburn and Missouri. Those are the 2. So I think that that's a pretty good indicator of how good this offense is, but also how good the defenses have not really completely just falling apart. Again, they are matchup dependent, but Missouri is looking, I think, slightly undervalued as a 7 seed, their record compared to their metrics. I don't see a round 1 exit for them at the very least, and I think a Sweet 16 run could be in the future, but it is dependent on the matchup, which I think it definitely matters if you're doing like seed-dependent scoring, like the ones I love to do, and we're going to do, where you kind of take the round plus the seed number, and that's your points and stuff, and the round keeps increasing. And I kind of figured out a great method of using like the Fibonacci sequence, which is kind of this mathematical thing, and adding with the plus seed to try and motivate and get good stuff. Like, hey, I picked a good first round upset. Oh, that's awesome. Instead of stupid ESPN where you get 1 point in the first round, and it's like, why would I pick any upsets? I get no rewards for this. Like, it's stupid. So I hate normal scoring. It's so dumb. I think you all should switch to the actual stuff, because the first rounds and the second round is like the best part and the stuff we remember. And in your bracket, you don't get reward for it. So if you're in stuff like that, where the seed actually matters, or you're in like a draft, my father does like a draft where You go around 8 teams and you basically pick, or 8 guys, and you basically pick teams, and the farther they go, it's like a snake draft, fantasy draft. The farther they go, in your portfolio of teams that you have, or your team, the more money you get back. You obviously put money in the beginning and you get money back. So if you're in stuff like that, the value for seeding matters, because you want to find value where you can pick a seed that you are confident in going farther in, that would be not normal to the person that would just pick all the favorites. And if that is a 7 seed winning in, the second round against a 2 seed, could be a big deal. Depends on the 2 seed, but keep an eye out on Missouri if they are a 7 seed as well. Then we have Kansas. KU, the big disappointment of the year so far. But the analytics really love them. They do. evanmia.com is much higher on them compared to KenPom, but they're both still pretty high for what they seed is probably going to be. However, I want to tell you, don't have them going to the Sweet 16. I'm pretty confident in saying that. I would not have KU. Bracket's not even out yet. I would not have KU going to the Sweet 16. Could they? Absolutely, yes, of course, depending on their, path or upsets. They could face a low seed in the beginning and then a big upset, low seed comes in the second round. But in predicting stuff as of now, I don't feel great about their potential underseeded value, because they would. And that chart that I showed last episode, and I'll show now, for underseeded stuff, they would be fitting there. Like, they would fit there as an underseeded team. But they cannot win an important road game. They just can't. Their last non-home win versus a tournament team was a neutral site game versus Duke and Michigan State back in November. Which is just not sustainable to pick in March, in my opinion. I don't want to put all my chips in the table because KU beat a team in November, and we're in March right now. They get way too close in road games. They should just dominate in. And it's just so weird because they're the most experienced team in the country. They're essentially just only 6 and 7 guys deep. AJ Storr and David Coit have kind of split lower minutes. There's no teams in the Sweet 16 since 2001 that are defensive anomalies that are 6 or 7 seeds. None. And that's what KU will be. They are a pretty good defensive team, like right at number 10, but below 50 in offense. They're a projected 6 or 7 seed last time I saw this. There's nothing like that since 2001 that have made the Sweet 16. Not one. If you want to include 5 seeds, that's the only one that opens up with San Diego State when they made their crazy run. That is the only one that opens up. But San Diego State was very elite as a defensive team. They were like top 5. KU was like 10. Yeah, that's a difference there. I'm telling you. I'd like to see KU, how they do in the Big 12 tournament. I haven't seen them yet because I'm recording this as the game is on. It's in a neutral site game, so we'll see how they do. If they win versus like whatever lower team they're playing, they'll have to play Arizona next, who they just beat. So we'll see if they can do the same there. But in the tournament, if they play a good 3-point shooting team, I think it really hurts them. If not, it really helps. Pretty simple. They played 6 teams that were in the top 35 percent, or that were in the top 35 for 3-point percentage. They lost 5 of them. The only win was in November versus the youngest team in the league, which was Duke, on a neutral site. That was the only one. I think KU is probably technically going to be underseeded. I honestly hope they win so I can fade them a bit more in the tournament, to be honest. I'm sorry, KU fans. I'm just telling you the facts. It's weird. I know. I'm sorry. Underseeded, experienced team. I just don't trust them. I just really don't. It's like the last actual like A game, meaning quad 1 game, like kind of technically quad 1 that they actually like won. It took a Hunter Dickinson tying his career high to beat Arizona by 2 possessions at home. And they're a below average 3-point shooting team, Arizona is. So, aside from Iowa State, who they beat at home, but Iowa State had 2 starters out, basically, those are their like big recent wins, and both at home. Different sites have kind of different opinions on them for Kansas. So it's really hard to really pin them down at a deficiency spot. But again, I think they're matchup dependent, and I'm very wary of having KU in the second weekend. I personally wouldn't do it. Bracket stuff comes out. We could come here. They play let's say, I don't know, they get a 6 seed, they play an 11, and then, 14 or whatever, and boom, they're in the Sweet 16. Sure, I'm not putting my money on KU right now. I'm just not, to make the second weekend. We'll see what happens, but I wouldn't do it. Next, we have Purdue, the runner-up from last year. They come in with a much, a similar group, but obviously without the one big core piece, and they're still trying to really replicate that a year later. For their historical context, or like similar players or similar teams historically, with their offense that are around a 4 or 5 seed, which is where I've seen, they have a 50% chance to make the Sweet 16. So coin flip if Purdue is going to make the Sweet 16, basically. All of the ones that didn't make the Sweet 16 were 2010 or later. Basically a coin flip whether they make the Sweet 16, and all the ones that didn't were from 2010 or later. Purdue, I'm not really comfortable making a certified statement on right now. Their effective field goal percentage is great, but nothing else on offense really stands out. They have the second highest home rank in the Big Ten, which is an Evan Mia stat that basically it says, hey, the higher your ranking is in this, the better you perform at home, which I don't love that for the tournament. I really don't. I don't think you can be that reliant of being good at home. Like, that does worry me. Weirdly, as weird as it sounds, I think if you're too good at home, it's a concern in the tournament because you're not used to succeeding on the road or in not comfortable scenarios. And they're the second highest home ranked team in the Big Ten. Their kill shot margin is worse than anyone in the top 10 offense, because they have a top 10 offense. It's the worst of anyone in the top 10. They are a team, I think a team that defends the 3 well and has good scoring inside is a really bad matchup for them. So I think that's kind of where I'll leave it. They are totally matchup dependent 100% for if they'll actually make the Sweet 16 or lose in round 1. I think those are kind of the two things we're looking at. But it really depends on what seed they play. If they are a 4 or 5 seed and what first round matchup they get, as well as what, if they win that matchup, what their second round looks like. I think they're pretty dependent. Past that, I'd say Sweet 16 is the ceiling for this team, but first round, second round exit, wouldn't be surprised as well. We just got to see who they play. Texas A&M, they don't currently fit this right now at the moment, but they're very close with their offense, and I kind of just wanted to dive in anyways, having a top 10 defense, but almost a below 50 offense. It's at like 48. For Texas A&M, I think it really depends on if they finish as a 2 or 3 seed, because the ceiling is a bit of a jump between a 2 seed and a 3 seed. If they're a 3 seed, which if they are, which they're kind of on pace to be, maybe not, but if they are a 3 seed, I don't love them seeing an Elite 8. I don't think it's going to happen if they're a 3 seed. If they're a 2 seed, I think that's their peak, and I'm not very confident in it. They're a very straightforward group. Poor offensive efficiency, number 1 in offensive rebounding in the entire country. They're just going to try and get a basket, and they'll keep trying on the offensive glass every single possession until they actually score. They have the most continuity and experience in the country. Not number 1, but like top 5 in both. They have a very deep bench. They run through their star guard and Wade Taylor, who's very much a volume shooter. I really don't see a round 1 loss for them at all. Whether they're a 3 or a 2 seed doesn't matter. But after that, if they face a fast-paced team, it could be a problem. For teams that had an average of at least 16.6 seconds per possession on offense, which would be around 60th in the country, they've played 7 of those games. They're 1-6, with the one win being a last-second crazy comeback win versus Missouri. So I think it seems pretty simple. They will go as far depending on the seed and the matchup. But I will not hesitate to have them out in round 2 if I need to, if it's a really bad matchup there. If it's not really that much, sure, totally fine having them go there. But if they're a 3 seed, I don't think they see the Elite 8. If they're a 2 seed, it's possible. Just really got to see the matchup. But in both cases, could they go out in round 2? Possible. So as weird as simple as Texas A&M is as a team, they're weirdly volatile in I think how far they could go, depending on where they are. St. Mary's is another one. They just lost the West Coast Conference Final, and they still fit here. Their historical comparisons, I think projecting like 6 and 8 seeds, half of them were out in round 1. The other half were out in round 2. Obviously, they have wins over Gonzaga, but that team is such an anomaly with its metrics and everything. It's just so different. It's hard to really put 100% confidence into those wins, with it being the only tournament team they've won. The other non-conference games they've had were really close overtime games with Nebraska and Boise State, both bubble teams, and at least one of them is not going to make it in Nebraska. So St. Mary's pretty quick. I agree. I don't see them as a Sweet 16 team. I think round 2 is their peak, and round 1 just depends on the matchup, like a good offense that shoots threes and gets to the line. If that's the case, boom, have them out in round 1. Do not have St. Mary's in the Sweet 16. Just doesn't happen. As a 6 through 8 seed, 6, 7, or 8, that's where they're projected historically. Teams like that just don't make it far. Don't make it far. Since 2001. Everything since 2001. Remember that. And then finally, BYU. Technically, they don't fully fit the list, but I still wanted to include them because I'm very interested in them. And I'm not as negative on them as I have been on other teams here. Their historical comparisons are 50% of them are in the Sweet 16, which is a 5 through a 7 seed that is offensively centered. But funny enough, if you watch the last video, the 6 seed comparisons, like, I said 5 through 7, they are projected. They could be 5, 6, or 7. Last video, we kind of dove into what 6 seeds are like and how, maybe it's not great to pick a 6 seed. The 6 seeds in their historical comparisons aren't great. 2019 Iowa State, 2007 Notre Dame, both round 1 exits. The offensive upside, though, for this team I like. They are 5th in the country in effective field goal percentage. They're deep. They have the 12th most bench minutes in the country. They are 7th in the country in kill shot margin and 2nd in the Big 12. They've had the best change in rating over the past 30 days. They've gone up 20 spots in their net rating over the past month. They have wins over Iowa State and Arizona on the road, so not just at home, on the road. And they play a very adaptable pace, but they prefer to play more up-tempo. I really am excited to see how they do in the Big 12 tournament. They unfortunately have to play Iowa State, so that's kind of a bad draw, but even if they lose that game, don't give up. Keep an eye on BYU as a potential Sweet 16 team if they get a fine matchup. Doesn't even have to be a great one, just a fine one. I think BYU could look pretty good in the tournament as well. Now, let's get into a new topic. There's teams that aren't too far off, but they're just, maybe not a new topic, but a similar one. Some teams didn't really fit this model of top 10 and lower than 50. They aren't quite, like I said, top 10 on one side, but still below 50 on the other. So, like, let's say 15th on one side, but still below 50 on the other. If we take into account only 4, 5, and 6 seeds, because these will be favored in 98% of the time in round 1, and 2 to 3 seeds are just kind of very rare that actually fit this criteria, and when they do, they split games between round of 32 and Elite 8. So this year we don't have anyone that is going to be a 2 or a 3 seed that's not even top 10 on the good side of the ball, and they're below 50 on the one that they struggle in. So again, 4 through 6 seeds, they are good but not top 10 on either offense or defense. And then the other side of the ball, they're still below 50 because the last teams we talked about are top 10 on one side and below 50. They're 4 through 6 seeds. 48% of them, outside of, I think one of them was a crazy anomaly I took out, which was 2023 Miami. 48% of them go out in round 1. So it's a coin flip if they're out in round 1, and 80% don't make the Sweet 16. Again, you can rewind because I know it was a lot of criteria, but 4 through 6 seed, and they are not top 10 in whatever they're good at, and they're below 50 in what they're not great at. There aren't many that fit this, but there's one that currently does, if all stands right. And I want you to guess who it is. They were one of the top comments in the last video for teams that don't like. I'll give you 3 seconds. Michigan. Yes, it's Michigan that fits this right now. They feel like the biggest fade ever right now. I'm sorry, Michigan fans, but unless they lose in the Big Ten tournament enough to where they're not even a top 6 seed, I've seen them projected as a 5 or 6 seed, and that is currently where they would be, and that would be a very big fade for me personally at this moment, Michigan. And if they win round 1, they're probably not making the second round. There's a chance, but 80% with a lot of sample size says that wouldn't be the case. And these are as of Tuesday, March 11th is when I found all this data. And then the last two things I want to get to, the bracketology anomalies, and these are mega anomalies. And when I say bracketology, I mean the concept of bracketology. These two are not normal in terms of what goes on any given year, and I want to go into them. And they're kind of the antithesis of each other. Rarely does it happen, one of them way more than the other, where we have a heavy difference between resume and analytics on both sides of the spectrum. And we have that this year. The first one is Memphis. Memphis is a projected 6 through 8 seed that I've seen. They could be even higher after their tournament. Their resume includes wins over Michigan State, Clemson on the road, Missouri, UConn, and Ole Miss. Their resume, in terms of resume rankings, ranks around 19 to 20th, which would be a 5 seed. But they are 48th in net ranking, according to KenPom, 37th, according to evanmia.com, and then 59th, according to Torvik, which is all over the place, but they have an average of definitely not a 5 seed, but not even a 6, 7, or 8 seed. These three average them to be around a 11 to 12 seed in terms of their metrics. So what gives? How good is this team? Why is there such a big difference? Well, I think in terms of why that's the case, what happens with the ratings is it does take into account margin of victory and how efficient you are. And I think for teams like that, they have had not just the big games, but even interconference games be very close a lot of the time. And yeah, they've won a majority of them, but they're very close a good amount. Whereas the other team that we'll talk about, a lot of them have high margins of victory for a good amount of the season. Whereas Memphis is kind of the opposite. A lot of close games here. But we can go back. We do have data for this, and we can look at over and underseeded chart that we saw last episode, one of my favorite things, and just go back and look, because we had a few and over the years, but we had 2 last year. South Carolina and Utah State. Again, I'm going based off a 6 through 8 seed because that's what they're projected right now. One was a 6, one was an 8. Good resume, but net ranking was much lower. 8-seeded Utah State won 1 game and then got crushed in the second round. Obviously, they did have to play a 1 seed. Number 6, South Carolina, had a round 1 loss. 2023, Missouri and Northwestern. Missouri wins round 1, and then they have a prime opportunity in round 2 to play a 15-seeded Princeton, and they lose to Princeton. And then Northwestern in round 1 loses after. 2022, I'll include a lot here. 8 seeds. You have Boise State and Seton Hall, both lost in the first round to a 9 seed. 7 seed, USC, round 1 exit. 7 seed, Michigan State, round 2 exit, although they did have to play Duke. But the bigger one, number 6 seed, Colorado State, round 1 exit. 2021, Clemson, round 1 exit. 2019, not really any major ones, but the closest ones you could see are 8 seeds, Utah State and Ole Miss, both round 1 loss. 2017, a lot. Number 6 seeded Minnesota, round 1 loss. 7 seeded Dayton, round 1 loss. 8 seeded Northwestern and Arkansas, round 1 loss. The only one that really stands out here, and I want to be fair, is South Carolina, as they did make the Final Four. But that's what you call a real outlier in this outlier data. They are loved and respected in history, but you don't make decisions purely based off outliers. You don't. So for the ones from 2024 to 2021, and I'll include 2017, I also want to point out their KenPom luck rating, because KenPom does a rating, and it's called a luck rating, and it kind of takes into account maybe how lucky a team has been for things that aren't necessarily in their control. South Carolina, 2024, 4th in the country in luck rating. Utah State 2024, 8th. Missouri in 2023, 7th. Northwestern in 2023, not very high, but top 35%. 2022, Colorado State, 6th. 2021, Clemson, 18th. 2017, Minnesota, same as Northwestern, top 35%. And when I say like 4th, 7th, 6th, those are in the country out of 364 teams. That is crazy. And if you want to include another one, 2016, we'll go back even farther. Number 3 seed, they don't fit this because it's only 6 through 8, but number 3 seed Utah State, 3 seed, pretty high, 9th in luck rating, second round exit. You do not want too much luck on your side going into the tournament in March, where it really just overinflates your seed. And as I'm recording, Utah State is the only main tournament team in the top 20 of luck rating this year, and they are projected 10 seed. But Oregon is 24th, and then behind them is Memphis at 33rd out of 364, which is top 9% in luck rating. Memphis has the wins, absolutely, but will it translate? Maybe. It honestly might. They're top 10 in three-point percentage, and they're one of the most experienced teams in the country, and I like them more than some of these other teams, but where they are seated might just mean a lot due to historical comparisons. Whether they are a 6, 7, or 8, maybe a 5 seed or higher, who knows? But I think it does matter. I would be very careful penciling them in if you view them as a Sweet 16 plus team by looking at just their previous wins. I'd be very careful doing that because the historical stuff shows us, hey, Sweet 16 is not even in the picture but for one team. That's it. So I'd be careful. I know some people like Memphis. We'll see how they do in the tournament. Where they're seeded 6 through 8 could be 6, 7, or 8. Historically, I went through all of them. It doesn't look amazing for Memphis there. But we'll see. We'll see there. And then I want to talk about the other one, the complete opposite, which, as you can guess, Gonzaga. Gonzaga is very, very weird. They are 10th, as I'm recording this, in net rating, according to KenPom. 10th team in the country. That's what they're saying. They're saying they're the 10th best team. They're 7th in evanmia.com. They're projected 8 or 7 seed. Probably 7 at this point. They just beat St. Mary's to win their conference. But aside from Baylor as a 10 seed back in like the first game of the season, that's their only win for teams that are actually in the field. And yes, they've had chances to win teams that are also in the field. 3 of their 8 losses are in overtime. Only 4 of the other losses, so that would include 5 at this point, because 3 minus 8 is 5. So 4 of these other losses are by 4 points or less. So they have one win that's not in overtime and by at least, more than 4 points. Only 2 of the 8 losses are to teams in the tournament field. So, they have no quad 3 or quad 4 losses, and the 2 teams that they did lose to are in the top 100 out of these 8. So their losses are not to teams that are scrubs or anything. They're very high because, as we said, they dominate other teams when they are winning. That's kind of how it goes, and that's why their rating is so high. And they are the lowest projected tournament team in luck rating. At this moment, 333rd, the lowest projected tournament team in luck rating is Gonzaga right now. And like I said, with the luck rating, KenPom, you don't want it too low, but for this sake, I think we do see this as a positive because luck is something you can't control or project to any given game. And with it being too high or too low, I think that can be really bad. A lot of teams, if they're too low, we don't even see them in the tournament because they had so much bad luck, they didn't even make the tournament. So, I think while the luck rating is not the end-all be-all, it's definitely plays a part in terms of, how teams are ranked. Because if it's low enough, it can give some value to teams that are much better than their seed and vice versa that are not as good as their seed. And they will be ranked accordingly because of it. Again, not the end-all be-all, but it's a pretty good thing to at least throw in there and look at. They are a top 5 in continuity, and they're top 10 in experience. So they are experienced and have played together for a good minute. They are a really good offensive team, and they do not turn the ball over at all. And we don't really have direct historical comparisons for them, but it's kind of split. 2024 Auburn was a 4 seed, so not as high, but they lost in round 1, and they were one of the most underseeded teams we've ever seen. 2022 Houston and Iowa, both 5 seeds. One made the Elite 8, one went out in the round 1. 2021 Loyola Chicago kind of fits. They made a Sweet 16 as an 8 seed, beating a number 1 seed. 2017, you had SMU as a 6 seed, round 1 loss. Michigan as a 7 seed, making the Sweet 16, beating number 2 Louisville and having a 1-point loss to the 3 seed Oregon, who made the Final Four. So it's really kind of 50-50 for Gonzaga at this point. It'll depend on the placing. But if there's a 2 seed that I don't love, I will be absolutely tempted to have Gonzaga see a Sweet 16 for the 10th straight year. So I would not necessarily completely count out Gonzaga in this case. And if I were picking the 2, I would prefer Gonzaga going farther over Memphis for the 2 crazy major differences that we have with net ranking and where a team is actually going to be seated based on their resume. Then I also wanted to go into this Evan Mia talent post that he made. We won't go too deep into it because it can explain itself. But this is another one to kind of keep in mind. Not all the time, but a good amount. Talent shows in the tournament. They can't be like all over the place. For me personally, especially like Kentucky last year, a ton of talent, ton of NBA talent, 0 defense, like a complete negative on defense and a very high turnover rate, which is why you lost. But teams like Wisconsin, Texas A&M, Oregon, Michigan State, Memphis, St. Mary's, some of these teams we've mentioned before. Now, this doesn't mean they can't go far, but they'll be seeded expecting to do so, and I think a majority of these teams will either just barely meet par or be a disappointment for what their seeds suggest they could do, because the talent just kind of prohibits it a little bit. And on the other side, again, not that we love all of them, but Gonzaga, huge outlier. Then you have Kansas, Baylor, and UConn. If I told you out of Gonzaga, Kansas, Baylor, UConn, half of them exceeded expectations, meaning if they were lower seeds, they either won in the first round or they got to a Sweet 16 if they were like mid seeds. Would you be surprised? No, I wouldn't. Absolutely not. So that's kind of what we're trying to view here. For bubble teams, Ohio State, Indiana, Xavier, all interesting watches, and bubble teams that, hey, maybe we could see them win around 1 game, maybe even more. I like seeing mid-major VCU in there. We definitely like that, showing that their talent is quote-unquote underperforming at this moment. Very dangerous. And then teams like Utah State, West Virginia, San Diego State, all stuff we've mentioned in this video kind of negatively. They're all bubble teams that might not really have a very high ceiling. Now, before we go, I do want to note one thing. I think people don't realize the crazy efficiency and just total net ratings that we have this year. The efficiency we're seeing for the average net rating of each at-large seed is very significant. The average, 1 to 2, 3 seed, if you compare this chart to other ones, is just way higher than the years before, but mainly that middle group too just seems way higher than years before, like the 4, 5, 6, 7-ish, around there. So this year in particular, but more so with the top, these top 3 and 4 seeds are better than seeds back in 2023, 2022, 2021. The best team from there, we have 3 or 4 this year that are better than those. So when I think it comes into play the most is the top, like I said, and then the middle, mid-majors. The average mid-major today is much better than 10, even 5 years ago, and they're only improving. And the top is almost as good as we've ever seen. As I said, if it holds now, we have, according to KenPom, we've never seen a team as good as Duke, Auburn, and Houston make anything less than the Final Four. I'll repeat, according to KenPom, their rankings that hold right now, I literally looked at 1998. Back to 1998, we have never seen teams as good as Duke, Auburn, and Houston make anything less than the Final Four. 2019 Gonzaga was an Elite 8 team, and was just slightly higher than current Florida and was really close to Houston, so that's why I couldn't include Florida in there. But if you want to, you absolutely can. It's just Gonzaga is the only outlier, and they still made the Elite Eight. And for Duke's sake, their floor is making the title game. I'm serious. The rating that they have at this moment, we've never seen a team with that rating that hasn't at least made the title game. Not won it all, but at least made it. I mean, take all that in. That is just crazy. That could be 3 guaranteed Final Four teams for at least 3 1 seeds, maybe even 4. And we could either see that come to fruition or have just some real crazy upsets happen in March. I think either one could happen. Now, it can change. This will be the last video I make before the bracket, but we're trying to keep this all in mind. All the stuff I talked about, all the stuff I've researched, I'm almost a teacher, damn near, trying to help you. We're trying to put it all together for the actual bracket that comes out this Sunday, and I cannot wait. I absolutely cannot wait. So please let me know your thoughts and kind of stuff that you took away from this video. Leave a like, subscribe, please. I'll have my bracket video out soon, and I'll say it again. We're going to do a bracket tournament, Stonehard Sports bracket tournament. Free entry. Winner gets $25. I'm going to do it on CBS Sports unless a million people want me to do it on ESPN, which I would hate, but I really want to explain to you why the scoring is good, and I love it. I'm leaning way more towards CBS Sports because you can change the scoring, but it's essentially giving you actual value for doing the work and saying, okay, I think this seed can beat this seed, and getting rewarded for that, but not an insane amount. I don't like the times round, but adding the round plus the seed, I think helps a ton in rewarding people who actually try and think outside of the box and get stuff right while taking risk reward, while also it still gives you a lot for actually getting the title winner right. And those are kind of the stuff I love about it. So CBS Sports is what I'm leaning towards. We'll probably do that. But anyways, it's a long video. Thank you so much if you got to the end. Thank you so much for the support on this channel recently. And again, please, if you liked, go ahead, share, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. So as always, stay smart, stay sharp, and I will see you guys on Sunday or Monday when the bracket comes out. Peace.